Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Men's Movement. I'm Dr. Jack Rocco, your host from the Ultimate Men's Clinic, and today we're going to talk about sex. And my guest reminded me, I told him that when we were discussing, and I said, TLC's song, Let's Talk About Sex. And he corrected me, it's not TLC, it's Salt and Pepper. So welcome back, Kyle. Kyle's been with us before. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me back. And I love that song, so I better know who it was.
Yeah, well, I did too, but the brain cells from 1990 might have been left in 1990, I guess.
It's true, true.
So, yeah, but I'm pulling up my notes here. We have a behemoth of a topic today, talking about sex. And in preparation for this episode, you start thinking, what questions am I going to ask him? What authority do I have to speak on this? What are the issues? What are the problems? And it's a rabbit hole. It's a deep rabbit hole. And the issues people have with sex. And we're gonna try to focus on breaking this down into three main categories of issues or points of context that may cause sexual problems, sexual incompatibility, those types of things. So the breakdown is similar to how I wrote my book. The first breakdown is nature, and I put things as far as like physical abilities. So there are physical issues that arise, in youth, such as premature ejaculation or embarrassment, psychological issues I put into the nature category. Um, as you age, there's issues with erectile function, there's issues with lubrication in females, there's issues with weight gain, muscle loss, a lot of physical things. And, I see these things in both of my orthopedic as well as men's health clinics. For years, people getting hip replacements. I'm having conversations with 80-year-old women, 70-year-old women about will I be able to have sex after my hip replacement? So there's a lot of, physical issues that come into it. Nature or nurture, the nurture category, I put in things like religion, socioeconomic class, racial differences. There's a lot of cultural taboos. In Philadelphia, it was almost true that, but somewhat true that, if you grew up in the Roxborough section of Philadelphia and your partner grew up in South Philly where the Italians were, you got Irish and Italians, like that was, so where someone lives could be a cultural problem with mating and sex and marriage. And then free will, the free will category, I'm putting in things such as fetishes, things like identity, people who identify with a different gender than what they were assigned at birth. And I think these issues, we're not here to judge, we're just here to take a 30,000 foot view of the issues that we encounter, I encounter, you encounter. So we're going to try and work through it in an organized fashion, but understanding that we're not here to solve all the problems. But what I really love about you, Kyle, right from the start, that we clicked it. You're a real guy who's had real problems, who has solved his own problems and continues to solve his own problems. And, those are the kind of guys I like working with. Those are the kind of professionals I like working with. Someone with a Ivy League certificate on their wall, Mass General or whatever, hasn't necessarily lived life. And I think both you and I have lived life and helped others live life. And that's what we continue to do by, solving other people's problems. It helps us to deal with and manage our own problems. You've battled cancer, we've all battled relationships, and I'm sure we have a little bit of good and bad experience when it comes to sex. So, a lot of this is our own personal take on it. And just, I want to open up the conversation to what I see in the office and help people to understand that this is what happens in our office. This is what we see. People come to us with these problems and we have to deal with them. So we are in a position, as a branch point. Someone comes to us with a problem, we can help you solve that problem. And if we don't know the answer, we have an approach to do it. Does that sound good, Kyle?
Hey, sounds good to me. It's definitely a lot on our plate, so let's see what we can chip away at, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I mean, let's get, you're relationship mentor and advisor. What kind of things do you see on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis in the office with regards to relationships and sex?
I think that's a pretty large spectrum there. I think I see various things, week to week. I would say that a lot of the time when it comes to sex, it might be a symptom of something else. Sex could it be the primary issue? I mean, that's possible. And I think that, like you said, there could be physiological things that are causing sex to be an issue. But a lot of it, I think, is it's a more symptom of something that may align with someone's mental health. And I think that men and women are also can be very different in that category. They also, men and women can embrace and utilize sex in different ways. So I think it also comes down to a gender difference as well. And I try to be bipartisan, but being a male, obviously I have experience from the male aspect of things, but I really try to embrace empathy and understand where females come from as well. So I think it's just a variety of things that really can come through the door. And I think what I seem to notice is that the way that men and women look at sex differently. And I think that men look at it as a way if they're at a high level of stress, if they're going through a lot, they see sex as a way to try to lower that stress and to try to burn off some of the the trouble from the day or the week, and they can jump right into it and they use that as a tool, where on the other hand, women, that's not how they work for the majority of them. I mean, everyone is different, but
Yeah. Yeah, we clearly understand that what we're talking about is generalities, not
yes,
specific
yes,
instances. And we don't want to get
right,
caught in that trap because it's a big world and we see all sides of it from where we are.
right, right, absolutely. And for women, it doesn't usually work that way. Women usually need to lower their stress levels, lower a lot of the other factors around them to come into a place, a mental place where they're able to participate in sex and to have their mind be kind of free of all the other things that are going on around them. So I often notice that men and women, when it comes to sex, they can be in two different pages or almost two different books sometimes, and that's a lot of time where the clash happens. And then from there, it's men are saying, well, my wife's you know doesn't understand me, and I'm stressed out. She doesn't like want to have sex with me, and that screws me up. But then a woman says, well, my husband is not being considerate and caring of all the stress that I have, whether it's work, kids, emotional well-being. And so therefore he's not being empathetic towards me. So then they come into a clash, and then it often leads to like, okay, now we have issues. Like what are we going to do about that? So I feel
Mhm.
like it's coming from two different spectrums that sometimes leads to an issue within the relationship itself.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, but it's also I think you alluded to it a little bit that I said, and I got a bunch of just general concepts that I've got on a list that I'm hoping to discuss, but the idea as sex as power or sex as a weapon, and I
Mhm.
guess sex is a manipulative technique. Sex, it's a biological function. It's
Mhm.
procreation when it comes down to it, but we've turned it into a recreation as well
Yeah.
as a source of tremendous enjoyment and a source of tremendous pain and suffering, when
Mhm.
improperly used. So, that do you see a difference between men and women in that, like, using sex as a weapon versus sex as power? Do men try to exert their power with sex, and I hate to generalize because that gets into many. male bad stereotypes that I don't agree with, that, this man's trying
Yeah.
to rule me. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But I also disagree with the, women using sex as a weapon. They have what they have at their source, but sometimes it's an attempt to bring the relationship closer. They're thinking of the relationship. He's thinking about work and just trying to relieve stress at the end of the day. I mean, is that
Right.
kind of, elaborate on that a little bit, some experiences you've had with people having that disconnect that is sexual, gender-based issues.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that you kind of said two things that we can hit on is that I think that sometimes men do look at sex as a power thing. And I'm not talking like a physical power thing. I'm not talking where a man will overpower women because that's obviously inappropriate on so many different levels. But it's more that men will see that if I can have sex with my partner, but more often if I can have sex with a woman, then like I'm the shit. Like I got this. I have power now because I have achieved something that is at the precipice of what it is to be like a man, which is to be able to have a partner or a woman that I can have sex with. And I think that's a lot of the time now with the culture that we're in. I mean, it like you said, it's so much more beyond the biological aspect of things. It's now like a societal thing where, the more women that a man can have sex with, and sometimes they think that maybe others will look up to them for that and see them as a certain figure, which there might be a shift happening in that because of the double standard of, a man can have sex with multiple women, he's a pimp or a player, but a woman who has sex with multiple men is often slut shamed. And I think there is like a shift happening, but not to get off topic. So when it comes to women, I think that I don't want to villainize women by any means, but I think that when it comes to a relationship, what I do notice is that a woman can possibly weaponize sex. And I think what I mean by that is they can withhold it. And if they can like withhold sex until they either are getting what they want from the relationship or from the man, sometimes that can cause a lot of turmoil within the relationship with it. And the man can also be questioning like, why is she doing that? Does she love me? Like, what is going on here? And I think that sometimes women do that in from an aggressive standpoint, from like a purposeful standpoint, and I think that other times they don't, and they do it more from an aspect of I'm not getting the emotional and mental support from you, so I'm not going to provide that physical that you may be looking for, and that could actually help the relationship because I'm not getting the other pieces that may be as important or more important to her.
Yeah, and I think we need to realize, we see things, and when you're in that situation, where you're like, well, I'm not going to sleep with him tonight because he didn't take out the trash and he got mad at me when I asked, whatever. I'm using
Hmm.
ridiculous examples, but you get the idea. Um, and then it starts down this toilet bowl of well, if she's not going to give me sex, I'll go find it elsewhere. I'll show her, So you get into these, and then it never works out well in the end. I mean, then you've got
Right.
broken relationships, you got to start all over again. And, if I've learned anything in my years, it's that we are more similar than different. And I mean that as far as men and women are more similar than we are different, and different women, different men are more similar to the one you've got than they are different. You're not going to, get out of a relationship and get into this completely different, wow, she is just so not like what I'm used to. You often,
Hmm.
you go into another relationship and you get the same thing, different flavor, but same general idea,
Hmm.
that, and I have a strong lean towards evolution, and there are different evolutionary strategies, and I mentioned this book a number of times, but it's by Robert Wright, and it's called the Moral Animal. Had a little drag on the brain there. Yeah, the moral animal. And the moral animal breaks down, it's very scientific, it's very nerdy. But it does break down the evolutionary strategies of both men and women. And,
Mhm.
I think that's the foundation upon which we are built. And then, you have pillars and walls and, adornments that make up all the different sexual behaviors and fetishes and whatnot. But I think the fundamental foundation is that sex and passing on our genes is ultimately why we are where we are. This is the result, us, me and you, two messed up bald guys, are the result. Yeah, I'm further down the line than you, but I mean, like where we are today, here in the present moment, with all of our problems, all of our issues, are the result of thousands and thousands and millions of years of behavior, and it's behavioral evolution, not just blue eyes, brown eyes, red.
Mhm.
That a lot of our foundation is at the cellular level, is at the mitochondrial level, the chromosomal level. These are the genes that we're passed on to, you know. Um,
Right.
and there are strategies, and he goes into the strategies. And women, he says, and just to grossly summarize, because it's a highly detailed book, but to grossly summarize, he said the two strategies are, a male, has as many sperm as he wants. He can impregnate as many women as he wants and pass on his genes. And then there's a dominance role of, alpha wolf, you know, the top gorilla, in a society. So a man can have sex and procreate as much as he wants and pass his genes on endlessly. A female's strategy is based on the fact that she, has a limited period of fertility where she can reproduce. She has a limited number of eggs, and each egg, it does one in general, there's one per month. And if that egg gets fertilized, that's given her a 15 to 20 year responsibility to raise that egg that then becomes
Mhm.
a child, that then becomes an adolescent. And, so the investment that a woman puts into, let's talk, there's like, sex is ultimately about, from nature's standpoint, getting that sperm into that egg. That's
Mhm.
what sex at its fundamental level is. But once you, like I said, as a female, she's got it takes a huge toll on her body to, you know, bone mass goes down, hormones are out, it sucks the brain out, so, raising a child, bringing a child to life, raising a child is a huge investment for a woman. But for a man, he can, come and go. So, the men's attraction is more towards a physical, is this person able to carry my child? Whereas the
Mhm.
woman's sexual preference is this man able to help me carry this pregnancy, raise this child?
Right. Yeah.
And there's some physical things. There's a physical attraction, but there's also a societal hierarchy. A man with a lot of money, a man with a lot of power attracts a lot of women. Is that his fault? He's doing the best he can, but I think it's just what happens. He may be
Mhm.
unattractive. You look at, I think one of the most famous, Rico Kasich and one of the swimsuit models. What was her name? I'm blanking on her name. But a lot of these, you're like, why is she with him? That's a
Yeah.
common question people ask. So we both use that sexual thing for status, for power, but also for manipulation and tools. But and this isn't something you want to think about every day. But like I said, when I, at my level, somewhere I'm thinking about these things, but they really affect relationships in the end. They affect children going forward, with divorce, with infidelity, with loss of trust, with family, with financial. It really is, it raises a lot of problems. And we don't talk about it. I guess that's the bottom line, is that, for as important as sex is, we never talk about it. Or, we talk about it in closed circles. I think women probably talk about it more. You hear about the girls chattering about, you know,
Mhm.
who's sleeping with who and who's blah, blah, blah. And men, we either don't talk about it, or it's, locker room rumors, or just memes almost of just some stereotypical, you see the butt on that girl. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
that
Right.
nostalgia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there are huge differences. And I said, it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. And, how often, I guess, you deal with, I don't know if you deal mostly with married people, with single people, but relationships. Do you think that makes a difference? Do you think marriage changes sex, changes the dynamics for both people? And how do you see that play out?
Yeah, I mean, I work with people that are in relationships, people that are not in relationships, people that have never been in relationships, people that are pick up and get in the wrong relationships for them. And I think that I don't think there's a really clear answer for that. But what I do find is when people enter a long-term relationship, let's say it's marriage or partnership of sorts, um, I do notice that the the sex can typically wane. It does usually go down. It usually becomes less exciting. I think when the honeymoon phase is over, if you want to add kids into the equation, you know, there have been multiple studies that say statistically sex will decrease. It decreases when you're married, it decreases when you have kids. And I think, like you said too, there's that aspect of maybe some of the excitement is gone if you've been with someone for so long because it is, especially from a man's perspective, more, but maybe from women as well. But speaking from my personal experience, people I've worked with and just biology, like we've discussed, when you have the same person over and over, is some of that excitement gone? Is some of the biology of spreading our seed per se, has that now decreased the because of being with one person? And I think that that's where a lot of other factors come into play. I think that's where you're bringing in like a lot of, communication, bringing in vulnerability, bringing in emotional attachment, and learning about your partner in so many different ways so that you can still have an exciting relationship. And from that exciting relationship, you can have exciting sex. And I think that a lot of the time people don't put the work in. And so they just kind of let it fall to the wayside and they rely strictly on, did they look good in the beginning? Did we have fun? And then they don't put as much effort into that aspect of the relationship. So sex can become kind of a chore,
Yeah.
especially for a woman, a duty, boring, and you really have to find ways to kind of mix it up. That's what
Yeah.
I have noticed in my practice and profession.
All right. So here's a black and white question. I love you. Thank you for coming on here, Kyle, because I'm putting you in a hot seat that I don't want to be in, but you find yourself in this situation. People ask you these questions in the office,
Yeah.
and you're like, most of the time you have to put yourself into their shoes. And like I said, you've proven yourself as a problem solver in your life and in your professional career. Um, and that's what this is. This is problem solving. Okay. So here's a big topic, just in
All
general.
right.
Are humans first, and then men and women, are they primarily monogamous or polygamous?
That's a great question. And I have contemplated that question a lot. I feel okay, so humans in general, okay, if I'm gonna go, okay, my
Yeah,
opinion
and
is that
and like I said, I know the answer. I know the answer is neither. It's a blend. I understand, but
it's
it's just
yeah,
bring
it's
up some of
hard.
the issues that come along with that, some of the problems you see with, because I've got patients right now that I'm talking with, um, and they're like, yeah, me and my girlfriend like to have threesomes. You know,
Yeah,
what is that? That's not polygamy, that's monogamy. But they're monogamous together,
yeah.
or they're polygamous together. You know what I mean? So there's so many interreacting. I didn't learn this in Catholic school. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things out there that you don't learn in Catholic school or Muslim school or Indian school. That's just like there are topics you deal with and that's what so much of the taboo and the problems. So I'm not expecting you to get these questions right, Kyle. I guess but just
Yeah. Is there right or wrong? We don't even know.
yeah. But anyways, discuss some of what you see in the office in regards to that. And the problems that monogamous relationships have in someone who is more polygamous in nature.
Yeah. And if I go with my gut, if I go with my gut on the original question, I would say that I think humans by nature might lean more into polygamy. And I think it's based upon being able to procreate. And now we obviously have an issue with the fact that we have overpopulated this world. Yes, the birth rate is going down, but there's so many humans on this world and we've done so much destruction to this world. Anyways, different conversation for a different time. But I believe that polygamy may be my opinion may lean more towards polygamy by nature. Now, when it comes to the gender differences, like you had said before, I think that it makes more sense for women to focus on monogamy because that's where you can raise the children, and their ultimate maternal instinct is to raise children, which therefore leads to prolonging, their gene pool in their family. I think like with men, they can go, like you said, they can go procreate left and right, whatever. And um, so I feel like that's that's my opinion, that's my thoughts. And
You're saying towards, and I'm going to agree with it. I'm going to agree with your contention that, that in general, probably more polygamous, but we live in a society where monogamy is rewarded
yeah,
or polygamy is clearly punished. Um,
can be, yes, definitely.
yeah, so anyways, difficult subject. And, I'm not going to go into, read Robert Wright's book, The Moral Animal. He addresses that issue and the different strategies. And, to summarize in my caveman way, he says that, like I said, a male strategy is to populate the world with his genes and to compete with other men to give as many, many of his
Hmm.
mini-me's to the world as possible. But a woman's strategy is much more complex. And in general, she wants to sleep with the gardener, the big muscle, the strong defending man, but she
Hmm.
wants to marry the accountant, the lawyer, the nerdy guy who's
Yeah,
going to stay at home. And that gets you into the topic of cuckolding. Have you heard of cuckolding?
yeah,
There's a
yep.
cuckold bird that will lay its eggs in another bird's nest and let that bird take care of. So the idea of, and we see this, like I said, with my adoption search and my adoption journey and the people I've met, that is a common thing, that someone does, DNA, 23andMe and Ancestry.com really messed up a lot of families, a lot of psychologies, people that
Yeah.
were raised, I mean, me, I was raised Italian, turns out I'm English and black. And I've met many people that, they did a DNA test and they found their mother, they found an aunt, or they found, that
Hmm.
wasn't their aunt. And she's like, yeah, your mother stayed with me when she was pregnant. And he's like, no, you got the wrong guy. She's like, you were adopted, right? He's like, no, I wasn't adopted. Guess what? He was adopted. But not only that, people that find out they're, that raised by their father, the father thinks he's the father, turns out he's not the father. So that is a common thing, so what you see out there, especially in the adoption community, some of the stories are unbelievable. So, the female strategy for some, but in general, is to do that, to get that guy who's physical, who's whatever attributes she values. But if
Hmm.
that guy's going to be a player and come in town and take off again, if she wants both, and a woman can get both, she can have the good genes and the good loyalty. Um, and some of them
Hmm.
use that, not condoning, just saying what I see out there. So, but I would agree that I think both are probably polygamous. The man for spreading his genes, the woman for getting this child from birth, from conception to adulthood. And I think that's a lot of the responsibilities of each parent are different in that regards. A man just,
Hmm.
I did my job, donated the sperm. But he's got to want to raise the children and be a part of their lives in order for
Right.
you need men in the relationships, and we can go into this, men staying around for their children and not being
Hmm.
a deadbeat dad. All these things are very important. But look where this conversation has dragged us, and
Right.
it can continue to drag us in innumerable directions. But what I'm, this is an icebreaker. This is to get people talking about it because you don't talk about it, you don't understand it. They say in AA meetings, hi, I'm an alcoholic or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
if you don't admit there's a problem, if you don't understand there's a problem, if you don't have a diagnosis because you just live your life pathologically, you can't solve it. So we're here trying to just expose. So polygamy
Right.
and monogamy, you go with polygamy.
I would, and to speaking, and I'll give you a quick excerpt of like my life is that I spent the majority of my life cheating on every girl that I was with, and I was with a large number of females, and at first attributed it to, biology, like this is fun, and I, going through my teens and 20s, and I eventually saw it as like a kind of like a power thing in a way that if I could have sex with a girl or a woman, then I've achieved what I wanted to with them, and now I have a sense of power, a sense of control, not really necessarily over them, but maybe over maybe some of their emotions at the time, or I got the final, I beat the final boss.
Yeah.
And so what I learned though is that I was being extremely like inempathetic towards their emotions and everything. And then I also learned that it was hard for me to ever build a strong, truly loving relationship. Because I was screwing the relationships, cheating, but it's also I never took the time to truly invest in kind of one person. Fast forward now, I've been with the girl I've been with now for 13 years. We're domestic partners. I don't believe in marriage, whole different conversation, but we're domestic partners. We've been together. We don't have kids, but this is the life we live and we enjoy it. But I've never cheated on her, and I've noticed that the trust is there. I've noticed that our relationship is stronger. Obviously, if we were together for 13 years, it has to have some sort of longevity strength to it. But it was more that I didn't. Are there moments when like the biology takes over and I'm curious about others? Sure. Like we're human. We all see other people and we're like, oh, they're attractive. And sometimes we think, what would it be like if we were with them for just a split second? But being able to quell those urges, I guess I could say, and really building this relationship, being committed and truly developing a strong emotional connection and experiencing like what love is. I think that has helped me to realize, yes, polygamous by nature, I still think we lean towards that, but can we find happiness and success
And I
in
guess
monogamy?
that's, yeah, I guess that's, a great transition, Kyle. I think we went from clinicians to personal, and that's,
Yeah.
great transition there. Um, but it's like I said, when I started researching this thing, is sex love? Is marriage love? Is marriage sex? Is it power? You know what I mean? Like,
Yes and no to
all the,
all of those.
yes. And when you, like I said, when you really start digging into a lot of these things, sex is, it's a fundamental biggest weapon and biggest source of power, And I would say with you, Kyle, I mean, I don't lean that direction, but you're a good looking guy. You've got some
Thank
good
you.
skills. You're a smart, we're not here, we're not a dating site here, but I'm just saying, like, you also had some physical things that women sought you. If you think you conquered all these women, I will disagree. I would say that these women were tempting you, you know,
Yeah, it's a good point.
because
Yeah,
unless you're committing multiple rape, unless you're a serial rapist, Kyle, you're probably an
that I am not.
attractive guy. Yeah, you're no, I know you're not. Believe you're not. Anyways, like I said, if you have multiple partners, I say that women, and I think Darwin agreed with me when or I agree with Darwin that females are the sexual selection comes down to the female. Is he
Hmm.
attractive? Is he powerful? You can approach a woman all day long, and if she has zero interest, you get zero results.
True. Yeah.
So the fact that you were so successful, I blame God for creating, that those faults or that opportunity for you. Like women were
Hmm.
choosing you as well. So is it truly
True. Yep.
power? Where does like I said, once again, we're further down the rabbit hole. Is this power man's power or is it women's power? Do women have the power to sexually select?
Yeah.
If a woman says you raped her, you raped her. That is one of the
Right.
few things where, there's a lot of guys who were misjudged. You know,
Hmm.
she said no one was in the bedroom at the time, but she said she was raped. She was raped. Why would she claim that? And that's a good,
Yeah.
but like I said, I think the power really lies my opinion, the women. Women do the sexual selection. You're not going
Yeah.
to
Now
score.
more than ever. Now more
Yeah,
than ever
right,
with how dating apps and technology and how women are empowered and don't need men as much because they can financially support themselves and
right,
childbirth is not a lot of women's priority anymore.
right.
So men are starting to lose some of the quote unquote power they may have had. And I think that there is a big transition happening. And I think that now you are absolutely right. I think women have the power of selection and therefore there could be many men that are going after a woman, but it does come down to her to be like, who is she going to select? And I think that you're right, and I think that that's causing a tremendous amount of mental health problems with men, being that there's a mating and dating crisis, and
All right,
men
here's
left behind.
you've opened up a whole nother can of worms. And once again, I am not an expert, but I use a lot of what I've heard over the years. Female sexual selection, because I did a lot of this research when I was writing my book. I said I went down to why were my parents together? Why didn't they want me? Why
Hmm.
did this all happen? Why, was it, it's a black white thing. It's a sexual revolution thing. It's the
Hmm.
60s. You know what I mean? So this, my book dragged me down a lot of these paths, which is why I feel comfortable talking about it. But the sexual selection is so strong. We're talking about sex, so we're going to talk about sex. Um, in situations where there's an orgy situation, where the woman
Hmm.
has multiple simultaneous partners, her body has an ability to sexually select the strongest. That there is there's
Hmm.
almost a battle of the strengths, and the days of Rome, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
examples of this through time. um and some people also claim that women's body is able to, and it could be hormonally derived, probably hormonally derived, able to select the sex of the female of the child, whether it's a male or female child,
Hmm.
depending on, so there's different. I think this is a very untouched field, but I think sexual selection is in the females' court for the most part,
Hmm.
and men are often men are also almost victims of that scenario. You know what I mean? You're just some dumb college kid having a beer with some buddies, and some chick, some woman, um, targets you. You're going home
Hmm.
with her tonight. You know?
Good chance, yes.
Yeah, like I said, in reality, you were just sitting there talking to your buddies. She comes up, I'm just saying, like, I think women have a lot of power in that. And I think, the old good guys finish last. I think good guys are often, I hear about it, marry, into sexual relations for the wrong reason, into
Hmm.
marriages for the wrong reason, that um, I think women are much smarter than us, and I give them 100% credit. But I do think that the world nowadays has, we've almost hit, I mean, I think we're very close to rock bottom when it comes to sexual morality, and both in women's ability to, or women's misuse of their power. They've got a beautiful gift. Women have a beautiful gift of beauty and charm and fun and
Hmm.
intelligence and wittiness and stuff that men are, but group of boys, a group of guys in a room are nothing compared to, a group of women. I think women, I have the utmost respect and
Yeah.
admiration for it, but I think it's also been abused and being abused nowadays to a tremendous degree. And I think good guys are often clueless. I worry about my son primarily. You know,
Hmm.
he is ill prepared for the women that are out there. And I think many
Hmm.
men, especially good men, the players are always going to be players, you know.
True.
But I think the good guys out there that are looking for good things are often victims turned into villains, through some of the,
Yeah.
the dynamics. You're like, I didn't see this one coming. She seemed like a nice girl, so
Yeah, right, right. And then that's what I think you're right. I think like a lot of the dynamic has shifted and the culture is very different now. And I think that when if something happens and a woman uh potentially hurts a man emotionally, mentally, then they do become villainized in a way because now they see women and as the bad guy, bad girl. They see him as the bad person, so they develop a callous of,
Yeah.
women are bad, they're all take advantage of me, and it creates a rift, and there is a rift with, certain echo chambers of men thinking that, oh, these women, all they want is to use me, whether it's, for money or whatever, and then they use and abuse and let me go. And then there's women that think that there are just men that are still so caught up on that all you need to do is provide financially and you'll be good to go. It's like there's so many more
Provide,
benefits. Yep.
protect, and shut up. You know,
Yep. Yep.
this is
So yeah, men
this
say
is
they provide protection.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I felt like I fell into that role. Provide, protect, and shut the up. You know,
Hmm.
like
Yep.
your opinion, as long as you're producing the money in the account, as long as the bills are paid and the social status is achieved, just we don't need your
Yep.
opinion anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes in the same vein is when men would say, women just need to just provide sex. Like I don't really care about much else. Like, you need to, if I'm providing you this, you just provide sex. And it's like it maybe back in the day it was a little more black and white, but I think that now there's just been such a societal, cultural, gender shift that men and women need to be so much more cognizant of themselves and what's actually going to make a relationship work, what's going to make,
Yeah.
the other person feel valued and kind of go from there.
I think I'm gonna add, you just triggered another train of thought with me. Um, and I love when I get a 100-year-old patient in the room, or a 99-year-old patient in the room. When I see someone, a centurion.
Hmm.
Um, these people know life, and
It's true.
I've had some very sharp centurions come into my office, and I always take the opportunity to ask them those questions that none of us have the years of experience to know. And the year, you
Yeah.
think of 100 years, you go back to 1926 and what the world was like in 1930 and
Yeah.
40. What I mean? Like these people have seen it, and if they're sharp enough, they're still onto it. They're still on Facebook, they're still doing it. But anyways,
Yeah.
when I get a female centurion in the office, I always ask them, I said, okay, I want you to tell me, has it ever been a man's world? And they're like, no. I swear to God, on
That's
my
funny.
father's
Yeah.
grave. Um, because you always wonder that. You're like, oh, it's a man's world, and you men are need to be held responsible for the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds of the world. Like
Hmm.
we're paying for the sins of the Mellons and whatever family created all these evils of the world, whatever men created all the evils of the world, the robber barons, like you and
Hmm.
I are taking responsibility for this. But when you ask the people who were alive during those days, I said, women tell me, 100-year-old women tell me that women have always ruled the world, ruled
Interesting. Yeah.
relationships. They're the Illuminati under the surface. You know what I mean? Like, and there is
Yeah.
abuses, and there are. I'm just saying, but I think I think women are more attuned to this. I think women are, relationships and the importance of relationships. Men are just what's concrete and stuck right in front of my nose, I think a lot of times.
Hmm.
I mean, kill the
Yeah.
enemy, kill the enemy, run and run, run, Forrest, run. You know,
Yeah.
women are strategizing. They've survived as long as they have for a reason, and they have the skills. So great subject, Kyle. We're coming to our end, but we could continue this forever.
Yeah,
I
for real. Yeah.
I just, I think my intention was, we're not going to cover this in an hour, but, we didn't even get into, fetishes and identities and, but I just want, guys who are watching, my audience that's out there, we've heard it all, it's out there.
Hmm.
I deal a lot with and you had asked me earlier, about the physical aspects of sex. That's primarily what I deal with. Does
Hmm.
size matter? Um, does firmness matter? How do you how
Hmm.
do you men who have erectile dysfunction, men who are conscientious about their size, we have techniques for improving that from the physical standpoint. I don't know anyone who has the know-how to navigate through the psychological and the strategic. Robert Wright does a good job of it in The Moral Animal, and I would refer people to that for a more academic view on the course. Um, I guess the idea is that, both with my practice and with your practice, we are in a position and also our personal experiences. I think we
Mhm.
both, had issues in our lives and we have solved our issues in our lives. And I commend you for that. And we're,
Solving. I
that,
don't think I've solved anything just yet. I'm solving. It's a work in
oh, correct.
progress.
It's always a process. We're always, but it's what I really liked about you from the start, Kyle. You're a problem solver. You're gutty. You're vigilant. You're diligent. All those characteristics that I think go into a good problem solver. I would
Mhm.
rather have someone who's interested, who understands life, than someone who has an X degree on their wall.
Yeah.
When it comes to just solve the problem. I'm here to, patients come to me because they want a problem solved. And, no one knows all the answers, but, we have
Right.
physical answers in our clinic. We have relationship and, psychological issues that you deal with. But, like I said, the topic was let's talk about sex. And I think it's something that we need to include in conversations. So whether it was in my
Mhm.
orthopedic practice where women are like, can I have sex after I've had a hip replacement? It's something we need to talk about. And if you can't talk to your partner, whatever relationship you're in, same sex, different sex, you
Mhm.
need to talk about sex.
I agree with that. Yep.
If anything, and once you open up that door and you talk about it, it isn't just sex. Sex is a boring procreation thing when it comes down to it. But, within a relationship, within a monogamous relationship, it's very important. And, if you're not talking about sex, you're missing a big part of that growth, because there is a sexual desire, there is a natural element to it. Women want sex. Like I said, I hear it. Women want sex just as much as men want sex, and women want kinky sex, and women
Hmm.
want romantic sex,
Yeah.
and it's anything you can think of. Women want role play sex. You know what I mean? Like it's men, it's women, it's a human thing, and that's where I think the Venn diagram comes to. Men and
Yep.
women are both interested in sex. And for whatever reason, society, religion, politics, power, us talking about sex is demonized or embarrassing, or you're ill-equipped to talk about sex. You know,
Yeah.
I feel I mean, it's something I deal with in my clinic and you deal with. I feel inept, and I think everyone feels inept and ill-equipped, but you're never going to get better equipped if you don't have the conversations to begin with.
I agree. I think that you hit the nail on the head there is that if people cannot have that sense of vulnerability and they can't push past some of their fear and have the courage to talk about sex with their if they have a partner with their partner or if they're entering a dating scene to like have those open conversations when it is appropriate, then it's always going to be that elephant in the room is not going to be discussed and it's going to probably cause a lot of friction, a lot of guessing work within the relationship when truly if you can have those conversations and get to know the other person on the other side of who you're trying to engage in that action with, it usually goes a lot more smooth and a lot more fluid. And that's within my practice, that's usually what needs to occur is having those hard conversations and being able to bring up concerns, bring up sex and what it means in the relationship. And I think that the final note is really when sex can be used as a tool but using it in the appropriate way that it builds things up, then it's going to be successful in the relationship. It's like a hammer. A hammer is a tool. If we want to use a hammer for what it's meant for in a positive way, we can build things. If we want to use it for something else, we could theoretically hurt someone or kill someone with the same exact thing. Sex is like that. It's a tool. Are you going to use it to build up the relationship or are you going to use it to destroy the relationship? That's the choice that it comes down to.
You nailed it, Kyle. That's why I needed you here for that final statement. That is the perfect way to end the conversation. Honestly, like I think it is a tool, and you're right. It's guns don't kill people, people kill people.
Very
Sex
true.
is the gun
Yep.
part of things. It can be used for good or evil, and you summarize it. So thank you once
Yeah.
again, Kyle. I really appreciate you being here. Um, we could do this again and again and again. So, reach out and let's have you back on at some point. But I think these are good issues that, like I said, I consider you a real guy, and you know, we treat real guys, and real guys come with real problems. and
Yep.
real guys don't have anyone to talk to about it
Very
because
true.
real guys are vulnerable, real guys are thoughtful, and the world doesn't want to hear that. They just want you to fall into the stereotype. But here at the Ultimate Men's Movement, the Ultimate Men's Clinic, we treat real guys. It's just what we do. We deal with real problems um, from a man's perspective, with a woman's we understand women and we understand, men's perspective. So that's what I think. That's what I like about this clinic is that I think men are underserved and I think we serve them well, both physically, psychologically, spiritually. So thank you,
Yeah,
Kyle.
absolutely.
We're going
Thank
to sign
you.
off. We've hit our limit, but great conversation and raised more questions than we answered
All
them.
right.
But I think that's a good discussion, because we're not here to solve the problem. If you know the answer, you're wrong, you know.
Correct.
And I
Yes.
think across life, if you know the answer, you're wrong. You don't know the answer, you just haven't dug far enough. So
Yes.
thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. I appreciate
Yep.
it. And you're a very well-rounded person yourself, and I can appreciate not only your medical background, but your life experience. And I think that you stand out amongst clinicians in your field because that you are so human and that you can bring so many different aspects into what you do, into conversations. And I admire that about you. So thank you for being, a positive
Thank you,
inspiration in
Kyle.
my life as well.
I wasn't digging for compliments, but I'll take that. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate
I'm just
it.
speaking from the heart, man.
Got you, brother. All right,
All
thank you.
right,
This has
Jack.
been this is our latest episode of the Ultimate Men's Movement, brought to you by the Ultimate Men's Clinic. I'm Dr. Jack Rocco, your host and target. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you at the next episode. Take care.